Hello everyone. Welcome to our CUNY Teacher Ed webinar series on the Educating All Students test. Today we're going to focus on test-taking strategies to set yourself up for success. Before we begin, I'm going to go over some housekeeping details, so you may want a pen and paper to take notes. First of all, my name is Jennifer Case. I work at CUNY's Office of Academic Affairs. Also on today's webinar are Ashley Thompson and Angelita Alvarado Santos of the Office of Academic Affairs, who will be moderating the webinar. If you're having any problems accessing the webinar or viewing the video portion, there are a few things you can do. First, you can follow along through the phone lines and just listen to today's information. But we also have today's deck archived online if you'd like to open up the PDF and follow along that way. The archived deck can be found on our Teacher Education website, which is cuny.edu/teachered. To minimize background noise, we've also muted all phone lines, but we will be taking questions during the webinar. You can submit questions through the chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll take the questions at the end of the webinar today, and we expect that this webinar will run for about 15 minutes. Now, to get started, we're going to go over a description of the Educating All Students test. This is a pedagogical test, so it's a test of teacher skills, and it focuses specifically on teaching all students in New York State. So there are questions about working with diverse student populations, English language learners, and students with disabilities, as well as questions about your teacher responsibilities and building positive home-school relationships. In terms of the structure of the test, we can see from the framework that it includes both multiple choice and written response questions. Looking at the sample questions, you can see that you're given a series of documents to read, similar to a case study, and then you answer both multiple choice and written response questions based on those documents. Overall, there are 42 selected response or multiple choice questions, and those 42 questions make up 70% of your total score. 3 of the areas of the test, diverse student populations, English language learners, and students with disabilities, also have a constructed or written response question. And each one of those written response questions counts for 10% of your total score. To register for the test, you go to the NYSE website, and there is a registration fee of $102. It's important to note that the EAS test is only available as a computer-based test, which means that you'll need to go to a computer-based test site to take the exam. Candidates here in the New York City area have let us know that some of the test sites fill up quickly. So if you need to test on a specific date or at a specific location, you'll want to register early to make sure that there's a seat available for you. You can look up testing locations and seat availability at the Pearson VUE website listed here. Now we're going to go over some testing strategies for computer-based tests in general and for the Educating All Students test specifically. So one of the most important things that we have been told in talking to candidates who've already taken the EAS is that they very often felt rushed for time. So you're going to want to plan your time out and have a strategy for taking the test. From the exam framework, we know that you have 2 hours and 15 minutes to complete the exam. So you'll want to think about your own strengths and areas where you think you may need extra time, and then also think about the scoring of the exam and where your score comes from in planning your test time accordingly. Some candidates stated that they went through the test and did each of the constructed response items first, making sure that they only spent 10 minutes on the questions, while other candidates went through the questions as they were given to them. And some candidates went through and did the reading section and the selected response first. So it'll really be based on your own preferences, but you'll want to think about how much time you have allotted as you're going through the test. You'll also want to make a study guide before you go in to take the EAS test. One of the nice things about the EAS is that it does have an exam framework with very specific knowledge and skills that you're going to be tested on. So you'll want to read through the framework and make a list of terms that you need to study or of ideas that you think may appear on the test. Candidates who have taken the EAS recommended reviewing response to intervention strategies, IDEA legislation, or IEP requirements as some of their examples in creating their study guide. One candidate also recommended making a note of any terms or ideas you think you may want to include in your written response section so that you have that in advance as well. You cannot bring the study guide with you into the test, but it's a tool for preparing for the exam. It's also important to note that this is a pedagogy assessment. It is not content specific, which means that you may have questions about grade levels or content areas that are different from your own. So for example, if you are an elementary education candidate, you may come across questions about teaching in a high school math classroom. So you'll want to focus on best teaching practices, but in creating your study guide, you may also want to talk with faculty or other students in your program about teaching strategies in other grade levels or content areas that you may be unfamiliar with. Before you go in to take the test, you're also going to want to review the rubric for the written response items. Make note of what you're going to be assessed on, which includes meeting the requirements of the assignment and providing support or evidence for your response. Make sure that you're answering all parts of the question, that you're giving evidence to support your answer, and that you're using information from the documents provided in writing your response. When you go to the EAS preparation guide online, there's a full rubric available which includes score point descriptions. That tells you everything that you need to do in your response to receive full credit. So be sure to review the full score point rubric before going in to take the test. The EAS is only offered through computer-based testing, which may be a new format for many of you. Before you go to take the test, you can practice with the computer-based system so that it's more familiar and comfortable for you. The NICE website offers a free tutorial on computer-based testing that shows the features, including how to move back and forth between the questions and how to select your answers. In addition, there is a free sample practice test available. It is not specific to the Educating All Students test, so it does not contain content questions specific to the EAS, but it does provide additional practice in selecting answers and navigating the computer-based testing platform. In terms of strategies for computer-based tests, if you are a person who likes to take notes while you test or highlight or annotate what you're reading, that is not a feature that's available on the computer-based test. However, you are given a whiteboard and marker to take notes on. So if you like taking notes during a test, you may want to practice that before you go in and take your exam, reading articles online and taking notes on a whiteboard so that it feels more familiar to you. You also are allowed to navigate through the test using the Exam Navigator, which lets you skip ahead if, for example, you want to do all of the written questions first or save a certain section until the end. You have the ability to do that. Another feature in the computer-based testing platform is flagging questions. You can flag a question and then come back to them later on in the test. This saves you time because if you need to skip a question, you don't have to go back through every part of the exam to find it at the end. In terms of test-taking strategies for the EAS, one candidate stated that because the written response items are not all in one section, pacing through the test can be challenging. So the candidate recommends going through the entire test at the beginning of your testing session to see where those written response questions are going to appear, because they're not all in one spot and they don't wait and put them all at the end of the test. That lets you know when they're coming and lets you know if you're pacing yourself accordingly. You also are able to navigate back and forth between the questions, so you'll want to read through the questions first before reading through the documents and charts that you're given. Take note of key words and phrases that are in the questions, and that way you'll have that as you're going through and reading the documents. When you're reading through the documents, you'll also want to pay attention to evidence or phrases that you may want to include in your constructed response. You can either take those notes down on the whiteboard provided, or you can just take a note when you're on the screen that may be a line that you want to come back to later. In terms of available materials in preparing for the EAS, there are 3 documents available through the NICE-T website. The first is the EAS Preparation Guide, which includes the full rubric that will be used to grade your writing, as well as sample questions and sample written responses so that you can see what they will look like on the exam. There's also the EAS Test Design and Framework. This includes information about the number of questions, the testing time, and the specific knowledge and skills you're going to be assessed on. And it is this test design and framework document that candidates recommended using to create your study guide. Finally, there's the EAS practice test. The EAS practice test is a full-length test. It's in the computer-based platform, so it looks very similar to the actual exam, but it is available for purchase, so there's a fee associated with it. It is $29.95 to purchase the EAS practice test. You'll also want to check with your school to see what resources and recommendations they offer in preparing for this test as well. At this time, we're going to pause to see if anyone has any questions. As I said, this deck is archived online, so if you would like to access the hyperlinks or information, you can find it on our CUNY Teacher Education website. If you have questions after the webinar, you also can email us at our CUNY Teacher Education email address, which is teacher.education@cuny.edu. So we'll remain on the line for just a minute in case anyone wants to submit questions through the chat feature. If you do not have questions, thank you so much for joining us today. And please join us again next Thursday when we go through testing strategies for the Academic Literacy Skills Test.